In August 2018, a seemingly perfect family in Frederick, Colorado, vanished without a trace. What hidden secrets led to their disappearance? To neighbors and friends, the Watts family embodied the American dream: a happy marriage, 2 beautiful daughters, and a baby on the way. Their home radiated the warmth of a loving household. But behind their carefully curated image, hidden cracks threatened the foundation of their lives. Financial strain, emotional distance, and unspoken secrets festered beneath the surface. What appeared to be an ordinary suburban life concealed a darkness no one could have imagined. This is the story of the Watts family, a story of trust shattered, lives stolen, and a community left grappling with the horrifying reality of what happened behind closed doors. Welcome to True Crime Daily Stories. Thank you to all our subscribers for your amazing support. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now to stay updated on more gripping true crime stories. Let's continue. In the quiet town of Frederick, Colorado, the Watts family blended seamlessly into their suburban surroundings. Their 2-story, 5-bedroom house on Saratoga Trail stood as a symbol of the comfortable life they had built. To anyone passing by, Chris and Shannon Watts seemed to have it all: a stable home, a loving marriage, and 2 beautiful daughters. Chris Watts worked as an operator for Anadarko Petroleum, a position that offered financial security. His job involved monitoring oil wells and handling operations at remote job sites. It was steady work, providing for his family and allowing them to live comfortably in their neighborhood. Shannon Watts dedicated herself to her family and her career. She was deeply involved with a multi-level marketing company called Louvel, promoting health and wellness products under the Thrive brand. Shannon actively shared her life on social media, posting videos and photos of family outings, celebrations, and milestones. In every post, she painted a picture of a supportive husband and a joyful home. Her videos often featured Chris playing with their daughters or showing affection toward her, reinforcing the image of a close-knit family. Their daughters, Bella and Celeste, affectionately called Cece, were the heart of the household. Bella, at 4 years old, was soft-spoken and thoughtful, while 3-year-old Celeste was energetic and spirited. Shannon adored her daughters and often recorded moments of their daily lives, sharing glimpses of their laughter and playfulness with her online followers. In June 2018, Shannon joyfully announced that she was pregnant with their 3rd child. She and Chris planned to name the baby boy Nico. In a video she shared online, Shannon wore a t-shirt that read, "Oops. We did it again," as Chris smiled when he learned the news. To viewers, this moment seemed to reflect their excitement for the future and the growing family they were nurturing. However, beneath this outward appearance of happiness, deeper struggles existed. In 2015, Chris and Shannon filed for bankruptcy, overwhelmed by mounting credit card debt, student loans, and unpaid medical bills. Their financial struggles weighed heavily on the household, creating an underlying tension that wasn't visible in Shannon's social media posts. By the summer of 2018, the cracks in their marriage became more apparent. Shannon took Bella and Celeste to North Carolina for 5 weeks to visit her family. Chris stayed behind in Colorado, supposedly to work. During this time apart, Shannon noticed a shift in Chris's behavior. He became distant and unresponsive. Her text messages to friends revealed her growing concerns about their relationship. She confided that Chris had become cold and was avoiding physical intimacy. In one message, she questioned whether he still loved her. Chris's emotional distance wasn't without reason. While Shannon was away, he began an affair with Nickel Kessinger, a co-worker at Anadarko Petroleum. Chris presented himself to Nickel as a man trapped in an unhappy marriage and claimed he was in the process of separating from Shannon. The relationship between Chris and Nickel intensified quickly. They spent weekends together, went on dates, and exchanged intimate messages. Chris's involvement with Nicole deepened the divide between him and Shanann. Despite these mounting pressures, Shanann remained hopeful about repairing their marriage. She planned a romantic weekend getaway for their anniversary, hoping to reconnect. Shanann wanted to believe that Chris's distant behavior was temporary. Yet, Chris had begun envisioning a different future, one without Shanann, Bella, Celeste, or the unborn baby Nico. The Watts family continued to appear intact to the outside world. Their neighbors, friends, and even Shanann's online followers saw only the curated images of family unity. But within the walls of their home, the foundation of their family life was quietly eroding. No one could have imagined how these hidden tensions would soon unravel into an unimaginable tragedy. The Watts family home sat still and silent on the morning of August 13, 2018. Hours earlier, at approximately 2 a.m., Shanann Watts had returned home from a business trip to Arizona. She had been away promoting Thrive products with her colleagues. A friend, Nicole Atkinson, had dropped her off that night, unaware it would be the last time anyone saw Shanann alive. Inside the house, Chris Watts waited. What happened between the early hours of the morning and sunrise remained hidden, but by daylight, Shanann, Bella, and Celeste were gone. Later that morning, Nicole Atkinson became worried. Shanann missed a scheduled obstetrician appointment, an unusual absence given how excited she had been about her pregnancy. Repeated calls and text messages to Shanann went unanswered. Concerned for her friend's safety, Nicole drove to the Watts home. Shanann's car was still parked in the garage, her purse and phone inside the house, signs that something was terribly wrong. Nicole contacted Chris, asking about Shanann, but his responses seemed cold and unconcerned. Trusting her instincts, Nicole called the Frederick Police Department to request a welfare check. When officers arrived, Chris greeted them at the door. He appeared calm, even cooperative, allowing the police inside. Bodycam footage captured Chris leading officers through the house, showing them Shanann's belongings. Her purse on the counter, her phone tucked between the couch cushions, and her keys still in the house. Shanann's car, with the girl's car seat still installed, remained untouched in the garage. Despite these unsettling clues, Chris insisted that Shanann had taken the girls to a friend's house. His demeanor raised quiet suspicion. He seemed composed, almost detached, as officers questioned him. Meanwhile, Nicole's concern grew. She knew Shanann wouldn't leave home without her phone or miss a doctor's appointment. Officers searched the house but found no immediate signs of struggle. The beds appeared made, and the rooms looked orderly. However, the absence of Shanann and the girls, coupled with the presence of their essential belongings, made the situation progressively suspicious. Outside, neighbors watched the scene unfold. One neighbor shared surveillance footage from his home security system, showing Chris backing his truck into the driveway early that morning. Chris claimed he had loaded tools for work, but his behavior on the footage seemed unusual. The neighbor privately told police that Chris's behavior was not typical for him. His nervous demeanor during the viewing of the footage added to growing doubts. By the afternoon, the Watts home transformed from a typical suburban residence into an active investigation site. Friends, family, and neighbors joined the search, but there were no immediate answers. Chris gave media interviews, pleading for his family's safe return, yet his emotionless tone unsettled viewers. Behind the calm facade, investigators sensed that something far more sinister had occurred inside the Watts home. The search for Shanann, Bella, and Celeste had only just begun, but the trail of clues was already leading to a deeply disturbing truth. In the days following Shanann, Bella, and Celeste's disappearance, the search intensified. Flyers with their photos spread across Frederick, and news outlets picked up the story. The case quickly gained national attention. The Watts family home, once quiet and ordinary, became the center of growing media scrutiny. Chris Watts stepped in front of news cameras, pleading for his family's safe return. Standing in the driveway of his home, he spoke softly, asking anyone with information to come forward. His words seemed appropriate, but something felt off. His eyes lacked emotion. His voice remained steady, without the desperation or urgency expected from a husband and father facing the unimaginable. To many viewers, Chris's behavior appeared detached. While he spoke about his missing family, his body language betrayed him. He folded his arms tightly across his chest and swayed nervously. Analysts and body language experts noted his lack of emotional engagement. Friends and neighbors who knew Chris began to question his sincerity. Meanwhile, Shanann's family grew more suspicious. They knew Shanann would never leave without telling someone, especially while pregnant and caring for 2 young children. Chris's calm demeanor only deepened their concern. As public interest grew, so did the pressure on investigators. Detectives closely monitored Chris's behavior. His inconsistent explanations raised red flags. He claimed Shanann had taken the girls to a friend's house but couldn't say which friend. He struggled to provide clear answers about his actions that morning. On August 15th, just 2 days after the disappearance, Chris agreed to take a polygraph test. The test was conducted by Tammy Lee, a seasoned investigator known for her calm but firm interviewing style. Before starting, she warned Chris, "This is not going to work if you're not honest." Chris failed the polygraph. The results showed deception in his responses, confirming investigators' suspicions. The test alone wasn't evidence of guilt, but it provided a critical turning point in the investigation. Detectives confronted Chris with the results. They pressed him on inconsistencies in his story and questioned him about his marriage. Chris initially denied any wrongdoing, but the walls were closing in. Under mounting pressure, Chris finally admitted to killing Shanann, but he told a different story. He claimed that Shanann had killed Bella and Celeste in a fit of rage after he asked for a separation. In response, he said, he strangled Shanann in a moment of anger. Investigators immediately doubted this version of events. There had been no history of violence between Shanann and the children. Friends and family described Shanann as a devoted mother who adored her daughters. As detectives probed deeper, another critical piece of the puzzle surfaced: Chris's affair with a co-worker, Nicole Kessinger. Nicole worked in the environmental department at Anadarko Petroleum. Chris had begun the affair in early summer while Shanann and the girls were in North Carolina. Nicole later told investigators that Chris claimed he was in the process of separating from Shanann. She insisted she had no idea Shanann was pregnant or that Chris was still fully involved with his family. However, investigators believed the affair motivated Chris to pursue a new life, one without his wife and children. This revelation dismantled the narrative Chris had spun. His carefully controlled public image crumbled. Chris's actions reflected a man driven by the desire to eliminate the obstacles preventing him from pursuing a new life. Investigators later noted how easily he lied and manipulated those around him. His ability to mask his true intentions behind a calm and quiet demeanor allowed him to avoid suspicion, until the truth became impossible to hide. Chris Watts did not erupt in sudden violence. His crime stemmed from a calculated and selfish decision to erase his family and claim a life he believed he deserved. This disturbing mindset revealed the depth of deception and the terrifying capacity for cruelty hidden beneath an ordinary exterior. On August 15, 2018, under intense questioning, Chris Watts abandoned his carefully constructed lies. The weight of mounting evidence and failed polygraph results cornered him. Investigators pressed harder, and Chris finally confessed, but not the full truth. At first, Chris claimed he killed Shanann in a rage after witnessing her kill their daughters. This lie crumbled as investigators uncovered inconsistencies. Eventually, Chris revealed the harsh reality. He described waking up early on August 13, 2018, and confronting Shanann about wanting a separation. The conversation escalated into an argument. As Shanann accused him of being distant and questioned his loyalty, Chris reacted with deadly violence. He straddled Shanann and pressed his hands around her neck, strangling her until her body went limp. She was 15 weeks pregnant with their son, Nico. While Shanann lay lifeless, Bella and Celeste, just 4 and 3 years old, remained asleep in their beds, unaware of their mother's murder. Chris wrapped Shanann's body in a bedsheet and began a grim sequence of events that defied comprehension. Chris loaded Shanann's body into the back of his work truck. He then carried Bella and Celeste, alive and confused, placing them in the vehicle alongside their mother's covered body. Surveillance footage captured Chris backing his truck into the driveway that morning, an act he claimed was to load tools for work. In truth, he was loading the bodies of his family for disposal. Chris drove to a remote oil site owned by Anadarko Petroleum, where he worked. It was isolated, far from prying eyes. There, the horror deepened. First, Chris smothered Celeste with her own blanket in the back seat of his truck. Bella watched as her younger sister's life was taken. Then, Chris turned to Bella. Terrified, Bella reportedly begged for her life, asking, "Daddy, no." Her pleas did not stop him. He smothered her just as he had Celeste. Chris forced his daughter's small bodies through the narrow openings of 2 separate crude oil tanks, submerging them in toxic oil. He then dug a shallow grave nearby and buried Shanann, along with the unborn son they had planned to name Nico. Chris's confession led authorities to the secluded oil site. On August 16, 2018, investigators recovered the bodies. The scene was devastating. Shanann's body, wrapped in a bedsheet, lay in a crude, hastily dug grave. The soil barely covered her. Nearby, the oil tank stood silent, concealing the bodies of Bella and Celeste. Oil workers assisted investigators in safely extracting the girls' bodies from the tanks. The toxic crude oil had severely degraded their remains. Investigators found tufts of blonde hair tangled in the hatches, physical evidence of the unimaginable. The recovery process was harrowing. Officers and forensic teams struggled with the emotional weight of the discovery. Even seasoned investigators described the crime scene as one of the most disturbing they had encountered. The methodical, cold manner in which Chris disposed of his family left many speechless. Autopsy reports confirmed the brutal nature of the killings. Shanann died from manual strangulation. Bella and Celeste died from smothering. Despite Chris's earlier claims, there was no evidence that Shanann harmed her daughters. Chris Watts had murdered his entire family and disposed of them with calculation. Detectives and forensic teams were deeply affected by the crime scene. Experienced officers, hardened by years of law enforcement, admitted that the Watts case was unlike anything they had ever seen. The image of Chris carrying his sleeping daughters to their deaths haunted investigators. The knowledge that Bella had witnessed Celeste's murder and pleaded for her own life disturbed even the most seasoned professionals. Chris's lack of emotion during his confession further unsettled detectives. His mechanical description of the murders revealed a shocking absence of remorse. Investigators struggled to comprehend how a father could carry out such calculated violence against his family. The discovery of Shanann, Bella, and Celeste's bodies confirmed the worst fears of Shanann's family and the community. The truth was more horrifying than anyone had imagined. The illusion of the Watts family's perfect life had fully shattered, replaced by a grim reality of cold-blooded murder. The carefully built facade of Chris Watts, the quiet, devoted father and husband, crumbled entirely when the truth surfaced. His confession stripped away every last fragment of the family man image he projected. On August 15, 2018, mere days after his family's disappearance, Chris was arrested for the murders of his pregnant wife, Shanann, and their 2 daughters, Bella and Celeste. The community that once rallied behind Chris watched in disbelief as he transformed from a grieving husband to a cold-blooded killer. His face, once seen pleading for his family's return, now appeared in mugshots splashed across television screens and news articles. The man who spoke softly about wanting his family home was the same man who had destroyed it. On August 21, 2018, the Weld County District Attorney's Office formally charged Chris Watts with 9 felony counts, 5 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of unlawful termination of a pregnancy, and 3 counts of tampering with a deceased human body. District Attorney Michael Rourke did not mince words. He called the murders deliberate, calculated, and cold. Each charge reflected the horror of Chris's methodical plan to erase his family from existence. The law, now fully bearing down on him, prepared to seek the maximum punishment. As the legal proceedings unfolded, Shanann's family stood in silent grief. Yet amid their devastation, they made a surprising request. They did not want the death penalty for Chris. Shanann's family, shattered and heartbroken, chose to avoid the agonizing years of appeals and trials that capital punishment would bring. They wanted swift and certain justice. Respecting their wishes, prosecutors removed the death penalty from consideration. On November 6, 2018, Chris Watts shuffled into the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, shackled and expressionless. He sat before the judge as the charges were read aloud, each one heavier than the last. One by one, he responded with a quiet, hollow guilty. There was no apology, no explanation, only the cold acceptance of a man cornered by the truth. The courtroom fell into a haunting stillness on November 19, 2018, as Judge Marcelo Kopkow prepared to sentence Chris Watts. Family members and the public sat in tense silence, waiting to hear the punishment for a man who had slaughtered his entire family. The judge's words cut through the courtroom with the weight of finality. He condemned Chris to 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole. 3 of those life sentences would run consecutively, 1 for Shanann, 1 for Bella, and 1 for Celeste, ensuring that Chris would never see freedom again. 2 additional life sentences would run concurrently for the additional murder charges of the children due to their age. But the punishment did not end there. Chris received an additional 48 years for the unlawful termination of Shanann's pregnancy, a life he ended before it even began. He also received 36 years for tampering with the bodies of Shanann, Bella, and Celeste. The weight of these sentences mirrored the gravity of his crimes, but no legal consequence could fill the void he left behind. The most harrowing moments of the sentencing did not come from the judge's words, but from the voices of Shanann's grieving family. Frank Razusek, Shanann's father, stood before the man who had destroyed his life. His voice trembled but remained steady. "I trusted you to take care of them, not kill them. They trusted you. Shanann trusted you. Bella and Celeste trusted you. You disgust me." Each word sliced through the courtroom. The pain in Frank's voice echoed the pain in his heart, a pain no sentencing could ease. Frankie Razusek, Shanann's brother, struggled to contain his rage and sorrow. He glared at Chris with a fury that words could barely express. "You heartless monster. I watched my family suffer because of you. You didn't just kill my sister. You destroyed our entire family. I hope you see their faces every time you close your eyes." Chris sat motionless. He offered no apology, no tears, only silence. Outside the courtroom, the weightiness of the tragedy spread far beyond Shanann's family. The Frederick community, once tight-knit and peaceful, was left shattered. Candlelight vigils filled the nights as mourners gathered to honor the lives of Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and unborn baby Nico. Flowers, stuffed animals, and heartfelt notes piled up outside the Watts home, a painful reminder of lives stolen too soon. Yet even in their mourning, Shanann's family faced a new kind of cruelty. Online conspiracy theorists and strangers hiding behind screens flooded them with vile messages, accusing Shanann of unthinkable things. The very platforms where Shanann once shared her life became tools for harassment. But Shanann's family refused to be silenced. They spoke out to protect Shanann's memory and to raise awareness about emotional abuse, the kind of silent suffering that doesn't leave bruises but can end in devastation. The community mourned, but it also learned. The tragedy became a catalyst for difficult conversations about domestic violence, manipulation, and the dangers of hidden abuse. The courtroom doors eventually closed, and Chris Watts was led away to begin his life sentence. But justice, while served, could not erase the horror of what he had done. Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico were gone, their lives stolen by the very man who should have loved and protected them. For Shanann's family, every sunrise was a reminder of what had been taken. Chris Watts would never again walk free, but the scars of his crimes would never heal. Justice had been delivered, but peace remained out of reach. Chris Watts began serving his sentence far from Colorado, locked away in a stark and isolated world that mirrored the cold nature of his crimes. After his sentencing, officials determined that housing him in Colorado posed significant risks due to the high-profile nature of his case. In December 2018, he was quietly transferred to the Dodge Correctional Institution in Waupun, Wisconsin, a maximum security prison known for housing violent offenders. The transfer was shrouded in secrecy to protect him from inmates who reportedly threatened his life. Even within the prison system, the horror of his crimes set him apart. Prisoners who had committed heinous acts themselves viewed Chris with disgust for murdering his family. At Dodge Correctional Institution, Chris was placed in protective custody, isolated for his safety. He spent up to 23 hours a day in his cell, with limited human interaction. His cell, small and windowless, became his entire world, a far cry from the spacious suburban home he once shared with Shanann and their daughters. His daily routine became monotonous and controlled. Meals were delivered to his cell, and his movements were heavily restricted. For 1 hour a day, he was allowed to leave his cell for solitary exercise in a small yard, surrounded by high walls and razor wire. No freedom, no companionship, only silence and solitude. Despite his crimes, Chris attracted unsettling attention. Reports emerged that he began receiving letters from female admirers. Some women wrote to him expressing sympathy, offering friendship, and, disturbingly, even romantic interest. This bizarre fascination with notorious criminals is not uncommon, but in Chris's case, it baffled many. Chris reportedly responded to some of these letters, though the exact content of his replies remained unknown. His existence behind bars became a strange blend of isolation and unwanted infamy. In the months after his sentencing, Chris sat in prison with nothing but time and the weight of his actions. In February 2019, he agreed to speak with investigators from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, CBI, the FBI, and the Frederick Police Department. During this 5-hour interview, Chris abandoned his earlier lies and revealed unsettling new details. He confessed that both Bella and Celeste were alive when he placed Shanann's body in the truck. Chris described how Bella and Celeste watched as he wrapped Shanann's body in a bedsheet and dragged her down the stairs. Celeste reportedly asked, "What's wrong with Mommy?" a question Chris ignored. He admitted to smothering Celeste first with one of her own blankets in the back seat of his truck while Bella watched. Bella, realizing what was happening, pleaded for her life. Her last words haunted investigators. "Daddy, no." Chris confessed that he then smothered Bella in the same way, showing no remorse for the terror he inflicted on his own children. He recounted forcing their small bodies into the narrow oil tank hatches. Bella's body, slightly larger, had bruises and scratches from being pushed through the small opening. Shannan was buried in a shallow grave nearby. These admissions contradicted his earlier claim that Shannan had killed the children. His words painted a far more calculated and brutal picture. Investigators who heard the confession described it as disturbing and emotionless. Chris spoke about the murders with disturbing calm, providing cold, factual details without any sign of guilt. His parents, who once defended him publicly, reportedly severed contact after his full confession. Shannan's family has completely distanced themselves, focusing instead on honoring the memories of Shannan, Bella, Celeste, and Nico. There is no parole, no appeals, and no future for Chris Watts. He exists in a silent, confined space, a fitting punishment for a man who destroyed everything he claimed to love. Despite her cooperation, many questioned how much Nicole truly knew. Internet forums and social media platforms speculated about whether she might have suspected Chris's intentions or if a relationship influenced his decision to kill his family. Some pointed to deleted text messages and Google searches Nicole made about being a mistress and high-profile criminal cases. However, law enforcement found no evidence linking Nicole to the murders. Nevertheless, the relentless public scrutiny forced Nicole to disappear from public life. She reportedly entered a witness protection program to escape the harassment and threats she received. Despite the full confession, questions remain unanswered. Did Chris truly act alone, or did anyone suspect his intentions? Were there warning signs Shannan missed or ignored? Could intervention have prevented this tragedy? This tragedy underscored the need for greater awareness of emotional and psychological abuse. Recognizing the subtle signs, sudden behavior changes, emotional distance, secrecy, could help prevent similar tragedies. It also highlighted the importance of fostering open, honest conversations in relationships and supporting those who may feel trapped or isolated. If this case compelled you, subscribe for more in-depth true crime storytelling as we continue to explore stories that reveal the darkest corners of human nature and the lessons we must learn from them.